Zhang Jiuling, Afterthoughts number 2. Orchid leaves in spring are thick and lush. Laurel blooms in fall are pure and shining. At their peak, so vigorous and alive. Each, at the right time, the glory of the season. Do they sense the hermit, living deep in their woods, who feels such joy to smell their fragrance in the air? These plants, by nature, are perfect in their place. Why flourish to be broken by some lovely hand? So as we said, this is the second installment of a series of 4 poems by Zhang Jiuling called Afterthoughts, all of them written in 737, at the time that he was exiled from court. And this poem is very similar to Afterthoughts 1. If you compare them, both follow the same model. So the immediate interpretation of this poem, the superficial meaning is that it's a nature poem. In this case, we have a description of beautiful plants, basically orchids and laurel blooms, which are at their height, with a beautiful aspect and emitting wonderful perfume. They are in a forest, and only the hermit can enjoy those wonderful aromas. And they are far away from the danger of lovely hands, maybe beautiful women, who might pluck them and destroy them in the process. Again, that's the superficial meaning, but I think it's very clearly, like the first poem, an allegorical poem. So very clearly, those beautiful plants, the orchids and the laurels, are a stand-in for Zhang Jiuling, for the virtuous scholar official, who is out of office in a forest, and whose virtues are appreciated by a hermit or people who live far away from court and far away from the danger of being destroyed. The first of the afterthoughts used animal imagery. This one uses flower imagery. And I find this probably more interesting because of the resonances that these flowers have. Now, I have to make a little detour here. Flowers and their scents were a very important symbol in a very old tradition of poetry, much older than town poetry. Between the year 300 before Christ and the year 200 of our era, a type of Chinese poetry flourished, which is called the Sao. This is not the oldest, it's the second oldest genre of classical Chinese poetry. The Sao poems were composed in the south, in the old state of Chu. And they were different from the canonical Chinese poetry of the Book of Songs in that they used a very vivid southern imagery, which included a lot of exotic plants from the south. And we have that in this poem because laurel blooms and orchids, they happen in the south. They don't grow well in the northern climate of China. In the original poem, I've checked it, it's not laurel blooms, it's a plant that grows in China, specific to that country, but the translator has chosen laurel blooms as the closest approximation. And incidentally, orchids, I have orchids in my terrace. They emit no fragrance, but these orchids are, in both plants, the laurels and the orchids in this poem are meant to be scent-producing plants. So why am I mentioning the South tradition in its main book, the Elegies of the South? Because in those poems, the protagonist, the poetic persona, is also a scholar official that has been expelled out of office because of slanders. And in those poems, you have a lot of shamanistic imagery, of flights of fancy in which the poetic persona travels to the cosmos, but you also have flower imagery. The poet associates himself with flowers and their scents. And these perfumed flowers are meant to be correlated to the virtues of the poet. And the same thing is happening here. Remember, Zhang Jiuling is from the south. He knows this tradition. He's using it in this poem. So the precious scent emitted by these plants is the virtue of Zhang Jiuling, of the scholar poet, which is not recognized by the emperor or by his courtiers. Apart from this, another relevant issue is the Taoistic imagery, which was also present in the first poem, and we talked about that. If you want to check it, you can watch it in the first of the Afterthoughts poems video. Now, in the Zhuangzi, one of the Taoist classics, it's stated very clearly that the useless and ugly things last long, and that a way of self-protection is trying not to be the head that stands out in the crowd, trying not to be too virtuous or too beautiful or too successful in human affairs, because you will be cut down. And the metaphor used in the Zhuangzi is the tree metaphor. Like there's this gnarled, bent, old, ugly tree. It has lived for thousands of years. Why? Because it's ugly. If it had been a straight tree, it would have been cut down for wood. And in the previous poem, we had a little bit of this. The swan wasn't ugly, but clearly the kingfishers in the tree were too beautiful for their own good. And here again, these orchids and laurels can live amidst their scent and be appreciated by the connoisseur, by the hermit, because they are safe from destruction, from a lovely hand, the lovely hand of a woman, but here metaphorically, the hand of the emperor. So quite a good poem. I found it aesthetically pleasing, and as pleasing, or even a little bit more pleasing than the first one, because of those resonances, those cultural resonances that I have just mentioned, which to a lesser degree were present in the first poem, but I think are clearer here. And that's all for today.